The first strike landed on her back, while her forehead was still pressed to the floor. The sound echoed through the church hall like a gunshot. Gasps filled the air. Wooden chairs scraped. Someone screamed her name. She did not lift her head. The second blow came harder. A sharp crack against her shoulder. Her body trembled, but her lips continued to move in silent prayer. Two male pastors stood behind her, faces red with rage. One held a thick Bible in his shaking hand. The other had struck her with an open palm. Furious that she was bowing, not in the way they taught, but in the way they feared. "She is mocking us," one of them shouted. But she was not mocking anyone. She was in sujud, on the cold church floor, in front of everyone. They grabbed her arms and dragged her across the polished tiles. Her scarf loosened slightly as they pulled her toward the main doors. Members of the church watched in disbelief. Some stood frozen. Others whispered in shock. For 30 years, she had been the strongest female pastor among them, and now she was being dragged outside like a criminal. They threw her onto the church steps. "Expose her!" One of the men shouted to the crowd gathering at the entrance. "She has betrayed the church." Her cheek touched the stone floor. She felt the sting of shame burn hotter than the pain in her back. Inside the church hall, hundreds watched, and no one knew that what they had just seen would change that building forever. If this moment feels heavy, stay with the story. What happened next shook hearts in ways no one expected. Watch closely, listen carefully, because nothing was as it seemed. Before that day, her name was respected. Her name was Pastor Mary. For 3 decades, she had served faithfully. She preached every Sunday. She counseled broken families. She prayed over the sick. She fasted often. She sang with tears in her eyes. The church trusted her. Children ran to hug her after services. Women sought her advice. The senior pastors praised her dedication. She had given her youth to that church. She believed she would grow old within its walls. At home, she lived quietly. No husband, no children, just a small house filled with books and soft light from a reading lamp. Most nights, she read scripture before sleeping. One evening, everything began to change. She was reading alone, flipping slowly through the Bible. Her eyes stopped on a passage she had read many times before, but this time, something felt different. It described falling on one's face in prayer, not kneeling on a bench, not sitting, falling on the face. She read it again, and again. Her heart beat faster. She searched for other verses. Again and again, she found descriptions of prophets prostrating, foreheads to the ground, humble, surrendered. It looked nothing like how she had prayed her whole life. That night, she did something she had never done before. She locked her doors. She closed her curtains. She placed her forehead on the floor. It felt strange, but it also felt right. Her heart felt calm in a way she could not explain. She told no one. Days passed. She continued leading church services as usual, her voice steady, her smile warm. But at night, alone, she repeated the prostration. Only twice, 2 secret sujuds. She did not know much about Islam. She had never read the Quran. She had only seen Muslims pray from a distance. But something inside her whispered that submission looked like that. Complete, direct, no middle person. She began to feel afraid of her own thoughts. Was she doubting? Was she betraying? Or was she discovering something? She prayed for guidance, the only way she knew how. But the image of prostration stayed in her heart. Then came the third time. It was early morning. The church was empty. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the floor in colors of red and blue. She believed no one was there. She walked to the front of the church. Her heart pounded. She looked around once. Silence. She slowly lowered herself. Her knees touched the floor. Her hands followed. Then her forehead. The church felt different from the ground. Closer. More honest. Tears slipped from her eyes. She whispered, "God, guide me to truth." Footsteps echoed behind her. She did not hear them at first. But someone else had entered through the side door. 2 senior pastors. They froze when they saw her. A female pastor. prostrating like a Muslim. Their faces changed instantly. Anger, shock, fear. They believed she was rejecting everything they stood for. One of them moved forward quickly, and that was when the first strike landed. Now she lay outside on the church steps, exposed before everyone. Members gathered in confusion. Some whispered, "Why would she do that?" Others said, "She must have been influenced." The senior pastor stepped forward and raised his voice. "She has been secretly practicing Islamic rituals inside this church." The crowd gasped. "She fell on her face like them," he shouted, pointing at her. Mary slowly pushed herself up to her knees. Her eyes were calm, but her heart was racing. She did not fight back. She did not scream. She did not deny it. Inside the church hall, something unexpected began to happen. A young woman in the second row stood up, then a man near the back. They had seen the way Mary prayed. They had felt something in that moment, but fear kept them silent until the senior pastor made a decision that would shake everything. He turned to the congregation and declared loudly, "She will stand before the entire church council tonight, and we will prove her betrayal publicly." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Mary looked up slowly. Public counsel meant questioning, exposure, humiliation, and punishment. But what no one realized was that more than 100 people in that church had already opened their phones, searching one word, sujud, and by sunset, something far bigger than one woman's humiliation had already begun. The church doors closed behind her as they dragged her back inside for confinement, and the announcement of the public trial spread across the entire city. The church basement was cold and silent. Mary sat alone on a wooden chair, her hands resting in her lap. The small room had no windows. Only a single light hung above her, casting a hard shadow behind her back. Hours had passed since she was dragged inside. No one had spoken to her. No one had asked her why. Upstairs, the church was no longer quiet. By afternoon, the news had spread far beyond the building. Members who were not present that morning began arriving early. Families came. Youth groups gathered. Elders whispered in corners. The announcement had reached social media. Female pastor caught practicing Islamic prayer inside church. Phones buzzed. Group chats filled with questions. Some people came out of anger. Some came out of curiosity. And some came because they remembered the look on her face while she was in prostration. It did not look like rebellion. It looked like peace. But no one said that out loud. Not yet. In the basement, Mary closed her eyes. Her back still hurt from the blows. Her shoulder ached. But the pain inside her heart was heavier. 30 years. 30 years of service. 30 years of loyalty. And now she was locked away like a stranger. She thought about leaving. She thought about denying everything. If she said it was a mistake, maybe they would forgive her. If she said she was only stretching, maybe they would let her stay. But then she remembered the moment her forehead touched the floor. The calm, the silence, the closeness. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered softly, "God, if this is truth, don't let me turn away from it." Her voice shook. She did not know the Arabic words Muslims used. She did not know the proper prayers. But she knew one thing. When she placed her head on the ground, her heart felt seen. Upstairs, the church hall was filling quickly. The council table had been moved to the stage. Chairs were arranged in a long row for the senior leaders. A microphone stood in the center. It looked less like a meeting and more like a trial. Members filled every seat. More people stood along the walls. Some faces were angry. Some were confused. Some were quiet and thoughtful. Among them were many who had searched the word earlier that day. Sujud, prostration, submission. Videos had appeared on their screens. People praying in straight rows. Foreheads to the ground. No music. No performance. Just silence. Just surrender. A few members had tried it privately at home that afternoon. Just to see. Just to understand. And something about it had stayed with them. But they came to the church anyway. Because tonight Mary would be judged. As evening approached, 2 security volunteers entered the basement. "It's time," one of them said. Mary stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, but her face was calm. They walked her up the stairs. With every step, the sound of voices grew louder. When the doors opened, the noise stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. The hall was full, completely full. She had preached to this crowd many times before, but never like this. The two men escorted her down the center aisle. No one clapped. No one greeted her. Whispers followed her as she walked. Why would she do it? Was she influenced? Did she convert? She betrayed us. But a few voices were different. Soft, uncertain. She looked peaceful. She didn't fight back. I don't think she was mocking. Mary kept walking. When she reached the front, she was directed to stand alone beside the microphone. The council members sat behind the long table. 7 senior leaders, faces serious. Cold, the head pastor leaned forward. "Mary," he began, his voice echoing through the speakers, "you've been accused of secretly practicing Islamic prayer inside this church." The room held its breath. Is this accusation true? The question hung heavy in the air. Mary looked at the crowd. So many familiar faces. People she had comforted. People she had prayed for. People she loved. Her throat tightened. For a moment, silence stretched. She could still deny it. She could still protect her position. Her home. Her identity. Her life. Instead, she spoke quietly. "Yes." A loud wave of murmurs filled the hall. The head pastor raised his hand for silence. "Have you accepted Islam?" he asked sharply. Mary hesitated. She did not know how to answer. I am searching for truth," she said. The words made the room even more restless. Another council member leaned forward. "Why would you bring Islamic rituals into this church?" Mary took a slow breath. "Because I found it in the Bible first." The room went completely silent. Several council members exchanged looks. "What do you mean?" the head pastor demanded. Mary spoke carefully. "I was reading passages about the prophets falling on their faces in prayer. I searched more. I saw that this form of worship already existed. I only tried it to feel closer to God." A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. Some remembered seeing those same verses online earlier that day. The council members did not look pleased. One of them stood up. "This is dangerous influence," he said firmly. "Islam denies our foundation." Another added, "And you practiced it secretly inside this church. That is deception." Mary lowered her eyes. "I was afraid," she admitted. The head pastor leaned into the microphone. "Then tonight, you will publicly renounce this practice. You will declare before this congregation that you reject Islamic prayer and return fully to the church." The room went quiet again. Every eye fixed on her. This was her moment, her position, her future. Her entire life depended on what she said next. Mary looked at the floor. She imagined placing her forehead there again. She imagined turning away from it. Her heart felt heavy. Slowly, she lifted her head. "I cannot renounce something that brought me closer to God," she said softly. The words landed like thunder. Gasps filled the hall. The head pastor's face hardened. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he turned to the council and nodded. A decision was made without discussion. He faced the microphone again. "Then you leave us no choice." The room became completely still. Effective immediately, he announced, his voice firm and loud, "Mary is removed from all pastoral duties, expelled from this church, and her name will be publicly circulated to all partner ministries." A wave of shock spread across the audience. But the announcement was not finished. "And," he continued, "any member found practicing Islamic rituals within this church will face the same removal." The hall went silent, because at that exact moment, more than 50 people in the audience slowly lowered their eyes, and one young man, sitting near the back, quietly placed his forehead on the floor. The moment the young man placed his forehead on the floor, time seemed to stop. At first, only the people sitting near him noticed. A few turned their heads. Whispers began. "What is he doing?" But then something unexpected happened. A woman beside him slowly stood up. She did not shout. She did not argue. She simply stepped into the aisle and lowered herself to the ground. Her hands touched the floor, then her forehead. Another person stood, then another. Across the hall, quiet movements began spreading like a ripple through water. No speeches, no protest, just people lowering themselves one by one. Some were trembling, some were crying. Some had only learned about sujud that same day, but they had seen something in Mary. Peace, truth, courage without anger. Within minutes, more than 100 people in the church were in prostration. The hall was silent. No music, no shouting, just the sound of people breathing and surrendering. The church council sat frozen. They had prepared for rebellion, for arguments, for chaos, but they were not prepared for silence. They were not prepared for humility. At the front of the hall, Mary stood still, her eyes filled with tears. She had not asked anyone to follow her. She had not invited anyone. She had not even spoken about Islam to them. All she had done was bow to her Lord, and Allah had open hearts. The head pastor tried to speak into the microphone. Everyone, please return to your seats. But his voice sounded weak in the quiet hall. No one moved. Some people stayed in sujud longer than they ever had before. For many of them, it was their first time placing their forehead on the ground, and something inside them felt different, closer, lighter, honest. Mary slowly walked forward. She did not look at the council. She did not look at the crowd. She walked to the open space in front of the stage. Then, gently, she lowered herself. Her hands touched the floor. Her forehead followed. This time, she was not alone. That night changed the church forever. The story spread quickly across the city, then across the country. Videos of the silent prostration filled social media. People were not sharing it because of conflict. They were sharing it because of what they saw on Mary's face. Calm, sincerity, no anger, no revenge, just submission. Within weeks, small groups began meeting quietly. They wanted to understand what they had experienced. Some started reading the Quran. Some visited local mosques. Some simply practiced sujud in their homes. Mary did not try to lead them. She did not create a movement. She did not speak against her former church. Instead, she spent her days learning. Quietly, humbly, she visited a nearby mosque for the first time. She sat at the back, listening, observing, learning how to pray properly, learning the words, learning the meaning. When she finally took her shahada, there were only a few people present. No cameras, no announcement, just tears in her eyes as she said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasul Allah. That day, she chose a new name, not to erase her past, but to honor her journey. She became Maryam. Life was not easy after that. She had no job. Some old friends stopped speaking to her. Her savings slowly disappeared. There were nights she worried, nights she cried. But every time her forehead touched the ground, her heart felt strong again. Allah replaced what she lost with something greater. Peace, purpose, and something she never expected. One afternoon, a small group knocked on her door. They were former members of the church. The young man who had prostrated first was among them. Behind him stood families, women, elderly couples, teenagers. They held copies of the Quran. "We want to learn," he said quietly. Miriam's eyes filled with tears. She was not a scholar. She was not famous. She was not powerful. But Allah had chosen her story to open hearts. Months later, the small group grew, then grew again. They began gathering in a rented hall. Then, with community support, they opened a small mosque. They named it Masjid As-Sajda, the Mosque of Prostration, not to honor Miriam, but to honor the moment hearts touched the ground and found their Lord. Years later, when people asked about her story, Miriam always said the same thing. "I did not change anyone. I only bowed. Allah changed the hearts." She never spoke with anger about the church. She never spoke with pride about the people who followed. She always spoke about sabr, about being patient when misunderstood, about staying gentle when humiliated, about trusting that Allah sees every tear, every injustice, every silent prayer. Because sometimes the greatest victory does not come from fighting back. Sometimes it comes from lowering your head and letting Allah raise your honor. And Allah raised her in a way no one could have imagined, not as a leader of protests, not as a symbol of conflict, but as a woman whose quiet sincerity brought hundreds closer to Islam. A heroine through humility, through patience, through truth. If this story touched your heart, share it with others. Not for fame, not for views, but for the sake of Allah. Because every heart that remembers Allah, every person who learns about sujud, every soul guided toward truth becomes a reward that continues. And if you want more stories that strengthen faith, remind the heart, and bring us closer to Allah, subscribe and stay connected. Share this message. Spread goodness. Because sometimes a single story can become someone's turning point, and Allah knows every intention.